The three words I'd use to describe my role is team, rewarding and challenging.
Positive, team, supportive.
Three words I'd use to describe this job: gratifying, inspirational, challenging. Before this, I was a hairdresser, but I wanted to do more than make people feel good. I wanted to help change their lives. I'm now part of a team that does exactly that every day.
I spend my days talking to the residents of Nottinghamshire, their families and the support services that help them on a day-to-day basis. We're the front door to adult social care in Nottinghamshire, and we're responsible for taking the time to build a picture through talking with our residents about how they lead their lives, the things that they find difficult, the things that they can do, and also looking at how they wish to fulfil their lives to the best of their possibilities. In the 5 years of working here, I've learnt so much, particularly about social care. I had no previous experience in it, but through a really good training and induction plan, I was given all of the skills and information that I needed to be able to do my job. I've also been able to grow personally and within my career since then through a personally tailored plan of support and training to keep me going.
We're a really close-knit team and we thrive off helping the community of Nottinghamshire to live a valued and independent lifestyle. Every day is different and there's always new things to learn, which makes the role interesting and really exciting. At the end of the day, knowing that I've helped a number of people to have a better quality of life makes every day worthwhile.
My name's Jonathan Gribbin. I'm the Director of Public Health for Nottinghamshire County, and I'd like to tell you about the COVID-19 Local Outbreak Control Plan for Nottinghamshire. It's all about containing the virus so that we can protect one another, safeguard our critical services, and enable our schools, our workplaces, our communities to flourish again. And the plan describes how we will do that in Nottinghamshire. It complements the national test and trace arrangements, and it builds on local arrangements with key partners like Public Health England, the district and borough councils, the city council and our local NHS. It identifies a range of settings such as schools, workplaces, universities, care homes and so on, which require specific plans to deal with any fresh outbreaks of the virus. It describes how we'll be monitoring on a daily basis to spot if there are any new outbreaks, and then coordinating action to investigate and deal with them, deploying extra testing capacity if we need to, or contact tracing as appropriate. The plan also deals with how we will continue to provide support for people who are made vulnerable because they need to self-isolate, and we'll be doing that through our community support hub. And we'll refine the plan as we go along to reflect the latest best practice and the information which government will be providing to the council. Finally, I want to acknowledge the lengths to which so many people and organisations have gone to already in recent months to stick with the guidance, to maintain social distancing of 2 metres wherever possible, to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently, to stay at home if you or someone in your household has symptoms, to get tested and to follow the advice that you receive when you get the result. By observing the guidance, you're protecting not only your own life and livelihood, that of your friends and also your loved ones, but also that of people you may never meet, but people who you're depending on and whom we must each depend as well. Your role in that is critical. Thank you for your help to contain the virus.
Hello, my name's Jonathan Gribbin and I'm the Director of Public Health for Nottinghamshire, and I lead the county's response to COVID-19. None of us want our children to miss out on all of the benefits that school brings. So I want to let you know just how hard our schools have been working to ensure that they've all got in place the sensible precautions to receive back pupils at the start of the new year. But of course, all of us need to play our part in stopping the spread. So alongside the guidance you know about already, I also want to urge you to follow the guidance on safe travel to school. Please walk or cycle, or if a car journey really is essential because you live more than 2 miles from school, please arrange drop-offs well away from the school itself. You can find out more details about this and about all of the other government guidance on our website. If you've any questions about plans or arrangements at a particular school, then the school itself will be the best place to answer them. Thank you for watching.
Addressing the committee, as this minimises the sound distortion on the Teams meeting. And also, if you're referring to any pages within the documents for the meeting, could you refer to them An example being page 9 of 102 rather than the individual items in each agenda. Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting of Communities and Place Committee, which is being held remotely with the majority of the 11 members joining the meeting from their own homes, as well as myself, it says here, but I'm not. I'm present at County Hall. So the councillors in the meeting today is Councillor Pauline Allen, Councillor Richard Butler, who is substituting for Councillor John Handley, who's on leave, Councillor Jim Creamer, Councillor Glyn Guilfoyle, Councillor Kevin Greaves, Councillor John Handley, who's not here, Councillor Tom Hollis, Councillor Vaughan Hopewell, Councillor Bruce Lawton, Councillor John Ogle, and Councillor Phil Rostance, and Councillor Gordon Wheeler, as Chairman of the Communities and Place Review Development Committee, is also in attendance. So welcome to all of you. We also have the following officers present today: Adrian Smith, Corporate Director Place, Derek Higton, Service Director Place and Communities, Matthew Neal, Service Director Investment and Growth, Doug Coots, Managing Director Via East Midlands, Gary Wood, Group Manager Highways and Transport, Sally Gill, Group Manager Planning, Sue Jakes, Flood Risk Manager, Sean Parks, Local Transport Plan Manager, Mark Walker, Group Manager Trading Standards and Communities, and the Clerk to the meeting, Noel McMenamin. We also welcome 2 representatives from the Environment Agency, Emily Mayley, who has been to a previous meeting, and Andy Disney, who are joining us for item 11, Flood Risk Management Update. This is the second virtual meeting of the Communities and Place Committee to be held in line with the new requirements of the Coronavirus Act of 2020. Please do bear with us if we experience any technical issues. If we do lose any members from the call temporarily, then officers will seek to assist in getting them reconnected as soon as possible, hopefully without the need to halt the proceedings. Officers will inform the meeting if they are unable to rectify the problem and if we need the meeting to be paused or adjourned temporarily. Because there is unavoidable double numbering on the pages, I'll reiterate, could you please use the pack page numbers, which I gave you an example of earlier on. Thank you, and I'm sorry for the long introduction, but the minutes of the last meeting held on the 2nd of July is item 1. Are we happy that those are agreed? Any dissenters? Thank you. We accept those then. Thank you. Item 2 is apologies for absence, which I mentioned earlier, which is Councillor John Handley, who's on leave, and Councillor Richard Butler, who is substituting. Item 3 is, do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? And do any members or officers present have any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? No, thank you. So we move on to the first paper, which is Performance and Finance Report for Q1 2020 to 2021, Place Core Dataset. So the recommendations are on page 9, and it's recommendation 1 and 2. The committee considers whether there are any actions, if required, in relation to the financial information on the council services for Communities and Place for the period April the 1st to June the 30th, 2020. And 2, the committee gives approval for to bring revised performance framework to a future meeting accounting for the impact of COVID-19. So I will now hand over to Derek Higton, who will introduce the paper. Oh, I need a seconder.
Yeah, happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Phil. And over to Derek Higton, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Cotty has indicated, then the purpose of this report is really to bring members up to speed with the Place Department's current financial performance. And you'll see from the report that it has been impacted significantly by the effects of coronavirus. And the report and the appendix sets out the detail surrounding that. And normally the report's secondary purpose would be to provide an update on kind of current levels of performance in a range of service areas across the department. Understandably and obviously, that has been severely impacted by coronavirus also. A good example would be library performance, for example, in the first quarter of this year, because our libraries were in effect closed. We literally had no visitors to our libraries, so it's difficult for us to effectively report performance. And what the report outlines is a proposal that we undertake some work to see if we can establish a more meaningful, in the current circumstances, set of performance indicators for the department, certainly for the remainder of the current year, so that we can effectively report to members on levels of performance, because the current performance framework that we have doesn't really fit at circumstances. So the purpose of the report really is to draw members' attention to our intention to revise our performance framework in the short term, and also to draw members' attention to our current financial situation as far as the police department is concerned in the light of the coronavirus pandemic. As ever, either myself or other officer colleagues are more than happy to pick up on any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Derek. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Guilfoyle.
Just unmuting. Hopefully it's not unmuted. It's the mute button is stuck.
We can hear you, Glenn.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, right.
Yeah.
The mute, it is looking over its mute. Okay. Thank you for that. I mean, it's good that we've got such a very concise report, in the sense that it puts all the issues together with a brief written. I think most of the issues that are in this report actually we discussed at the first meeting that we held, and they were flagged up as areas of concern should the COVID-19 issue continue on. So there aren't really any sort of surprises in the sense of what's there. Other than I am to say is the coroner's one. As you know, I've asked on a number of occasions for a report on the coroner's service to come to us. And clearly there's a significant impact, and I can understand why. I'm not criticising, because clearly we do need the storage facilities. But you can see, I just wanted to clarify, it does talk about the fact that our contribution is 1.67 million. Is that the same as it is for the rest of the service, which is we pay near enough 40–50% with the city? So therefore, is the total projected cost of that spend somewhere in the region of nearly £4 million? Or is that the total cost of the project? And also, could we have a report on that? If it's not, I know sometimes that they don't like to make that particular place known to the public for various reasons, and whether we could have that in a confidential report to members, as we do have oversight. But also, clearly, this budget has always been a difficult, and in the last 3 to 4 years, it's doubled, if not trebled. And I just, if we've ever got to the bottom of that, and I'm still have concerns about the fact that we have no control really over its expenditure.
Thanks, Glyn. Derek, do you want to come back on that, please?
Yep, certainly. So there's kind of two parts to that question, Councillor Guilfoyle. The first is the 1.67 million a share of a total cost that would be shared between the county council and the city council, as is the case with most coroner's costs? Yes, is the answer to that. And that cost represents, I think, at the moment about 50% of the total cost. So the total cost is in the region of £3.5 million. Pounds, and that's all COVID related. As far as the broader financial issue is concerned, a detailed report has been prepared and is due to be considered by the Finance and Major Contracts Committee on coroner's costs. So it is that issue is being considered by a council committee. Administration felt that Finance and Major Contracts was the appropriate place to consider that matter, and I can ensure that you receive a copy of that report.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, Glyn. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hollis who would like to speak. Thank you. Tom? Are you with us, Tom? No. Is he connected? Yes, it looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like he's connected, Chair.
I'll move this. Speak through that, sir.
Councillor Hollis?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry about that, Chair. I've had a problem with my laptop. You'll have to turn that off, Dave. Yeah.
Do you wish to speak to item 4 at all? I've got your hand showing. Yeah,
I
okay.
do apologise about the technical mishap
okay.
there. I'm just going to speak to Dave's laptop just at the side, and hopefully we're back on mine by the next one. But I want to try and be as constructive as possible, because let's be truthful, we're all in this together, whether you're Conservative, Labour or Ashfield Independent or none of the above, frankly. I have a number of concerns with this report, and I hate to trample on Councillor Guilfoyle's approval of the report, but only at the last committee we highlighted that there was 35 undelivered capital maintenance projects in Ashfield. Since then, lockdown restrictions have completely changed. Only 3 of those 30 plus projects have since been completed. It was a report presented to the committee in good faith. It was then not, actions were then not taken. And then we turn to this report. The committee, again in good faith, approved the budget. We're now being asked to approve, or rather give notice and ask for opinions on the fact that we've now spent, what is it, over 8.2 million pounds more than was originally budgeted. I don't truthfully blame COVID for all that, as the report clearly even argues against itself. I mean, on page 1 of the report, we're told that only £200,000 is COVID related, and then on point 8 on page 8 of the agenda, page 2 of the agenda item, we're told that for example, 1 million was extra spent on send home to school costs, which seemingly has got nothing to do with COVID whatsoever. So there's discrepancies in the report about how much we're highlighting towards COVID. But my main point, Mr. Chairman, we're asked in the recommendations to provide comments and concerns. We cannot go on having reports that we can't meet deadlines to or meet financial obligations to. I mean, we present a report as a committee to the full council. We ask the full council to put faith that our budgets are correct at a time when council budgets are extremely tight. We all know that. We all have different conclusions about where we think how the problem might be solved. But we need, as a committee, to be robust with the figures that we're presenting. And I struggle with this. It's no better than the pie in the sky, frankly. What I'd ask is that when we are looking at these financial reports, bearing in mind we might have a second wave of COVID as well, which will bring all sorts of issues to our budgeting anyway, I'd ask that we, particularly you, Chairman, and maybe the Vice Chairman and potentially the opposition leaders in Glyn and South, would sit around the table and just go through the figures a second time. Well, I think we need to be a bit more robust, because this is the second time now our committee's got it wrong, and has to go quite substantially. £8 million is no meaningless figure. I mean, that to save my Shore Start Centre for 50 years, Mr. Chairman. I think actually we need to make sure these figures are. That's all I really ask, and that's me trying to be as constructive and supportive. It's clear we've got it wrong, and that needs to be highlighted.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Gary Wood if he'd come back on the highways issue that you mentioned, and then I'm going to go to Adrian Smith after that. Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Councillor Cotty, and thank you, Councillor Hollis, for the question. So on the capital programme, you'll be aware, obviously, because of COVID, that things have been delayed, but we've been asked the question from David Hennigan, and we've provided an update with the Ashfield schemes, and the majority of those are planned to be delivered during September and October. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Adrian, thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. So it's just to reassure members that that the figures that are provided in the report are accurate. They've been validated by finance colleagues and the capital accountants and the finance business partners, and as well as being reported here in the level of detail that we provide to service committees, as we've referred to earlier in the response to Councillor Guilfile, a series of reports going through to Finance and Major Contracts Management Committee 2. Members will also be aware, perhaps already, that we've been providing regular monthly returns to central government through our Delta returns, so that we can appraise government of the impact that COVID-19 has had on our finances. And of course, to pick up the point, one of the points Councillor Hollis raised, these are forecast overspends. So the team have done, so for example, within transport, an enormous amount of work over the summer to model what the impact would be on transport and helping children in particular to return to school, whether that's from SEND into SEND settings or into mainstream settings, and then to make sure that we apply all of the new guidance that we've had from the Department for Transport and the Department for Education, so that things like social distancing, for example, can be maintained within buses. And that, of course, has meant a whole range of additional costs that are coming. Now, as you can see in the appendix, that's not yet money that's been spent. It's money that is included in our forecast towards year end. So what this report says is if we spend as we expect, particularly in relation to those additional obligations or requirements provided to us in response to COVID-19 and managing infection control in particularly, or if we don't recover income that we were otherwise expecting to, which is also a significant impact on our budget, then that would be the outturn at the end of financial year. Now, I think the thing that we can look on with some satisfaction is, having done that validation, including with government, the other costs or the overspends that are not related to COVID-19 are very small, given the size of the budget that we spend, £130 million, which I think reflects well. But nonetheless, we, like most authorities across the country, have incurred significant pressures, lost income, but also increased cost. And therefore, the forecast outturn is in the region of £8 million over the anticipated budget. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Adrian. Okay. Glyn, Councillor Hollis mentioned you. I didn't know if you wanted to come back on anything at all.
I didn't say I agreed with the report, Chairman. I think that was, I was saying that I understood that the data that was presented was outlined to us earlier, but also just, and I think the director did try to qualify what was said when he pointed out that he said that most of the money wasn't COVID-19 related. Actually, the paragraph doesn't say that. If members read on page 1 or page 7 and 102, 5, it says that the majority of the forecast overspend, 7.99 million, is due to COVID-19, and the 191,000 due to other factors. So actually, that is the reverse of what the councillor said. So, you know, if we're going to say things, let's get them right, please.
I'm just going to pass you back to Adrian.
Sorry, Councillor Guilfile, if you misunderstood my
No,
input.
not you. It was Tom who...
right. My apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm quite clear that the overspend is COVID related. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Lawton, please, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, John, Chairman. A couple of things really. One is, Adrian, that what really worries me is the £1 million overspend in National Water Sports Centre. Obviously, we're in partnership with a organisation which is supplying a service at this particular venue, and therefore we have to be very, very careful how we manage that situation, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is subsidising a private company, and then whilst it is an important facility for Nottinghamshire, we do need to keep a lid on it. And B, we need a strategy to be put forward by them, how they intend to bring themselves, sort that situation out. That's the first point. The second point is that I think it's an excellent report. It is concise and is showing us exactly where we have risks within this portfolio. I totally disagree with Tom. Actually, I think he's got it completely wrong as far as his criticism of it is concerned, and it is allowing us to be able to have an input to the possible implications of COVID on this service area. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Councillor Lawton. Derek, would you like to come back on the Home Pierpont question, please? Thank you.
Yep, certainly. As far as the Home Pierpont Country Park is concerned, we are absolutely working very closely with the operator, Serco, to ensure that we can both reopen as much of the facility as possible to meet public demand, because it is first and foremost a country park, and also to do that in a way that is as cost effective as possible. But because the Water Sports Centre, the country park, is an income-driven entity, so in a normal year it would generate well over £3 million worth of income. The vast majority of that income simply hasn't materialised and is unlikely to materialise this year. The operator is facing significant additional costs, and it's those costs that we anticipate needing to meet for the remainder of the year, whilst the facility kind of gets back up and running and on its feet. An added complication, of course, is that a site like the Water Sports Centre is to a large extent seasonal, with the vast majority of its income coming during the spring and summer months. And of course, they're the months that have been most heavily affected by COVID. At the same time, its costs are relatively stable. That's the backdrop to the additional costs that we anticipate making. The contractual arrangement that we have with Serco means that what we will not be doing, and what the County Council will not be doing, is subsidising the profits of a private sector operator. I don't anticipate Serco making a profit at this site this year.
Thank you, Derek. I've still got hands up from Bruce and Tom. I'm presuming you've not put them down, is that right?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to briefly come back if that's okay.
Well,
just on the Water Sports Centre particularly.
You can, but I'm stretching the rules on speaking more than once, and I know I'll let Councillor Guilfoyle, if you can make it short, Tom, that would be appreciated.
Short in that consensus manner. But no, I think just to pick up on Councillor Guilfoyle's comments with regards to the clarity of what I said, I think members, and I'll ask him to play it back, was I did highlight that the fact that the £8 million was COVID related, 200 grand was not COVID related, yet on page 2 it goes on to say that sent home to school was £1 million. So to me, that's not COVID related. And the report doesn't seem to state anywhere that that's anything to do with COVID. So there's a discrepancy in the figures, was what I was calling. But and I would highlight to Councillor Guilfoyle that I'm the member of the minority group here. He's the member of the opposition group. Our job is to scrutinise the report, of which the leading group has come forward with, and I think we'll all agree that we agree with the majority of it. However, there's just a few points of clarity that is our real role as community leaders to highlight, and it's no more complicated than that, nothing personal, but we've had 2 reports that are wrong, and that's where we wanted to go. But moving on to the point where the reason I wanted to speak was really to do with the Water Sports Centre, and to highlight the fact that the district and boroughs are having a similar problem. Members of the committee will know that I'm lucky enough to represent our county and our council on the Culture, Tourism and Sport Board in Westminster. And we are having a range of trouble with the government ministers, and I hope Conservative members could help here, with regards to getting them to understand the council budgets. For example, we have a leisure contract with our leisure centres that brings a return into the council, as in a similar way that Notts County Council has with water sports centres, etc. And I'd use this opportunity to highlight the fact that it's one of the few things that the government doesn't seem to have grasped in supporting the leisure industry, because they are facing some tough times. They can have less people in spin classes, less people comfortable wanting to go to swim. I mean, the outdoor facilities is less of an issue, but there's still less people going through the doors, compared to what we budgeted and what they budgeted. And it really needs to be highlighted that they need some relief as well. It's great what we've done for small businesses, etc., but the leisure industry does need some support. And I'd look together if we could do something together as a committee, actually, write to the government minister and ask if he'd reconsider their objectives with regards to particularly leisure centres and outdoor leisure facilities, whether they be private, community organisations, non-profit. To me, they're all community organisations that deliver services, and I'd love to work together on something like that. And obviously, it's affected in this report. Financially, it's affected our council. It affects the public, and I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to work together on something. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, it was a bit lengthier than I'd hoped.
Thanks, Tom. Well, I've been contacting my local MP as well as my local areas around and contacts I have. I mean, the situation isn't ideal for anybody, and I'm a member of a gym, and I'm paying not to go at the moment, but I want it there when the situation changes, and it is tough times for all the businesses. Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to say anything? Would you put your hand down, Tom? Then I know next time if you want to talk. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to the vote then, and we do it in reverse order. Are there any members that wish to vote against the paper, the recommendations? No. Is there any member that wishes to abstain?
Me, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Hollis. Okay. Anybody else? No. So I take it that it's agreed by the other members on the committee. Thank you very much. Right, item 5 is developer contributions and COVID-19. I'll just get to the right page. The recommendations for this item are that committee agrees that requests for payment deferrals are considered and authorised where necessary by the Service Director, Investment and Growth, in consultation with the Chair of Communities and Place Committee and Chair of Planning and Licensing Committee during the period up to July 2021. So I'm going to ask Sally Gill if she would like to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper has come. Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
Sally. Yeah, could I just ask if I've got a seconder, because I'm not doing the job very well at the moment. I'm sorry. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sally, if you'd like to take it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this report is for members to give consideration. We've had requests from developers to defer some of the payments for Section 106 contributions to County Council services. This is a request that we have we're happy to meet. The Ministry of Housing and Local Government has approached local authorities, obviously, to ask them to work with small, medium enterprises, and in this case developers, to help aid the overall COVID recovery. And one of the requests that have been made to local authorities is that where we have 106 agreements and payments are due at certain times because certain development triggers have been met, we have been asked if where necessary and where it can be evidenced, that we will work with developers to agree to, in certain cases, defer payments. For example, we had an approach from a developer in, I think it was in Gedling, that because of the COVID lockdown, they didn't build any houses, so they didn't have any sales for 3-4 months, and they couldn't meet their trigger payments to us. So they came to us and asked if we would defer receiving the monies. We will still receive the full amount of monies, but instead of, say, getting it in June, the agreement that they would like to have is that we receive those monies in September. So there will be no overall impact on the council's expectations of money coming to deliver on new services that are needed as a result of development. But it's a way of working with developers to ensure that they've got a cash flow and that they can keep operating and keep building, which helps deliver new homes for the communities of Nottinghamshire. But this is very much focused at the smaller and medium developers, not the very large volume builders, but it's our way of being able to work with developers and help their overall recovery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sally. I've got Councillor Creamer who'd like to raise an issue. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let's say I can actually see the sense of this, particularly at this moment, because it's not the usual times. But I do have some concerns about how often it can be deferred, if you like, because in ordinary planning meetings, it wouldn't be unusual for something to be deferred 2 or 3 times. And that brings up an issue as well of costs, rising costs, etc. Any interest lost, any payments we have to make because of the deferment. And something that doesn't concern us directly, but does concern our take on all the issues, is local councils. I mean, if they're coming back, are only coming back at the moment on viability to actually reduce or cancel payments. That's always concerned me in a general case, but in this case, it does concern me quite a bit about viability as an excuse not to pay. Many people will pay, many constructors will actually pay correctly and all the rest, but if they can actually reduce payments, in fairness at this time, is there any work being done on viability at all with the district councils? How much are we working together on this? They are the collection authority, effectively.
Thank you, Sally.
May I answer that? This is an issue, obviously, for the county council and for the district councils, because whilst our money is for county council services, the other pots of money will go to district council services. But the requests that we've had so far, the developers are not saying that they are unable to pay or they don't want to pay. They've just asked if we could defer, instead of, say, being paid 1 month, being paid a couple of months later. And in the cases that we've had so far, those developers have indicated they're very willing and want to pay any index linking. So there'll be no overall reduction in the money coming through to the county council. It's just that they have had a period of time where they haven't had any income because they haven't sold any properties. But the wider consideration of viability, that is always a wider consideration, and that's something we work with the districts and the developers, looking at developments and viability and how much may or may not be coming through 106s, because it's very important we secure the funding that we need to deliver the new additional county council facilities. And there's always lots of discussions about viability and things, but that is a separate issue that we're always examining. This request for members' consideration is very much a short-term COVID-related request, and in line with the request from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government.
Thanks, Sally. Is there anything you wish to add to that, Jim? Has that answered your question?
No, just the one bit about the amount of deferments. Are we putting a limit on the amount of deferments? So if we defer, or is that going to be looked at in each individual case again? So you can defer till September. That company may or may not need to defer till January. So I'm just wondering, a deferment, how many times will be allowed to?
I think
case by case.
Yeah, we've had a couple of requests so far, and obviously we've only had an initial request. We've not yet, time hasn't passed, so that we would be getting to the period where those developers would need to pay us. But that is an issue that we need to be alive to, because there's deferment to help COVID recovery. But if people are then continuing to ask for yet another request, that has implications for our delivery of our capital programme and our projects. So that will be something that we will be looking at very closely, and certainly members will have oversight of that, because hopefully we won't be in that situation, but we will keep an eye on it and ensure that we don't get to that situation.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Sally. Councillor Hollis, and then I've got Councillor Guilfoyle after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sally and Councillor Creamer for the comments. But I'll have to say that I cannot be more strongly opposed to what we're doing here. It was mentioned in Sally's report that the developers don't need to, I think was the phrase she used. So why are we giving it to them if they can pay? Secondly, I've been on planning for over 10 years at Ashfield District Council. We're all familiar with the fact that a profit margin in a developer's scheme is always 20%. They'll consider it not viable if they're not making at least 20% profit. I don't believe these are the types of people that need support from our council with regards to COVID. You know, we had the opportunity to help the most in need, you know, mums and dads that can't afford to put food on the table with the Sure Start centres. We closed them during COVID, but we're then going to be helping multimillionaire developers. Anybody that follows stocks and shares will know that in the last week alone, property developers have seen a 10% increase, small and medium-sized and large property developers, a 10% increase in their holdings. So at a time when they're probably becoming more and more liquid with their cash, we're giving them a break. I'd have probably supported this a few months ago, but now isn't the right time to be saying to people, multimillionaire business people, that we don't want money into council services when we're in need of it more than ever. And I know Sally, reading between the lines, focuses on viability. This will have effect on some projects because projects are very time limited. We allocate 106 money in a very timely manner to projects nearby the site or often in the same town. If we're saying to people don't pay, that quickly becomes they might not pay. And I can't tell you how strongly I am against this, Chair, but I think I don't need to wax lyrical. We're benefiting people that don't need to be benefited, Mr. Chairman, and I just don't see the need in it whatsoever.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hollis. You've made your point. I don't know if Sally wants to come back on that, but
just to say, everything will be looked at on a case-by-case basis and in consultation with the chair of this committee and the chair of Planning and Licensing Committee. But I would stress to Councillor Hollis, the key thing is that we need these sums of money to deliver new schools, roads, etc. And if we feel that there is going to be any problem with that delivery, or we're relying on a sum of money coming in because it's the last bit of funding before we commission the delivery of some new classrooms or a new school, then that's going to be very different consideration, and the outcome will be very different, I'm sure, to a developer who's not yet started building, and they might say, well, your first trigger is 2 months down the road, but can we make it 3 months down the road? It's on a case by case, but I would agree, Councillor Hollis, the County Council needs these sums of money to deliver its capital programmes and things, but we will not want to compromise that. So the case by case is important. If we feel that it's going to impact on our services greatly, then our answer will be no, we won't consider that request. But it's where we can to help the overall recovery of the construction industry. We would wish to do that, but it's the implications for us, and that is the key issue.
Thanks, Sally. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you for that. Yeah, Chairman, we had similar concerns in relation to the report that people may take advantage of the scheme, but also that there will be people who are seriously affected. There are probably small businesses in particular, not the bigger businesses, who will be affected. And I think the issue that you say that it is going to be on a case-by-case basis, the issue that if we can be assured that due diligence checks are going to be made by officers relating to it to ensure that, you know, the wool isn't being pulled over his eyes. And also what I would like to ask is if that we can have a report to committee, probably quarterly if possible, on a list of the schemes and the issues that are affected, because clearly there are a number of areas where, I don't know, say a roundabout, it could be anything, it could be traffic lights, could be that we were wanting to proceed with but maybe delayed because of at this scheme. And I think it's important that members know where their areas are affected, and also in particular the residents that live in that area that may be affected as well. So if that's done, and it is done on a case-by-case basis with all the checks and balances, then I think we've no alternative, because what we don't want to do is see all through this small businesses go under, and if we can help them through that point. But clearly also on the other side, we've got a duty to the ratepayer, and we don't want to be being taken advantage of. And I think that's what Council was sort of making out. Let's not be took advantage of, but where we can help, let's help.
Thank you, Glyn. I think Sally will agree with that, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay, Sally. Yep.
Yes, certainly we can do that, because hopefully there won't be many requests, but we can provide members that detailed information in due course.
Thanks, Sally. I've got Councillor Richard Butler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I mean, Councillor Guilfoyle's pretty much said what I was going to say. Looking through the report, I think it's just a pragmatic situation we're in. I mean, how many times in all our lives at the moment are we referring to exceptional circumstances and unprecedented wealth and all the rest of it, which we all know only too well. But looking at the report, we are this recommendation, this report is based on government advice and guidance anyway. They are asking us to consider this, and that's what we're doing. But I've got every confidence that the professionals in the planning and relevant department in this authority will not shy away from asking for developer contributions when we need them and when we consider we need them. And I mean, I know there is probably some authorities around the country who don't necessarily not quite as sort of forceful or diligent as this authority is in asking for contribution. So I'm sure that there won't be any, well, I hope there won't be any cases of developers taking advantage, but each case will be looked at, or my understanding is, should any request come in, and it is a big should, it will be looked at very carefully and closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I don't think there's anything to come back on that, Sally, but okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, I take it that there aren't. So again, we will move to the vote. Are there any votes against the recommendation? Councillor Hollis? Are there any abstentions? There are none to my knowledge, so I am now presuming that it's agreed by the rest of the members on the committee. Thank you. Agreed. Thank you very much. We go to item 6, which is an update on key trading standards and community matters. And I will formally move the recommendation on page 22, which number 1 is considers the updates and highlights any actions required. Item 2 is approves the recommended closure of the COVID-19 Community Fund on the 17th of September as the local authority emergency assistance fund for food and essential supplies has now provided funding across Nottinghamshire to help residents struggling to afford food and other essentials due to COVID-19. And recommendation 3 is approves the launch of the Talented Athletes Round for 2020-2021 in November 2020. Can I ask Mark Walker, please, to... I've got to remember to get a seconder.
Yeah, so, I'll second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know why I'm ignoring you today, Councillor Rostance, but it's not deliberate. Okay, can I go to Mark Walker then, please? Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as ever, a comprehensive report on pages 17 to 24 of the pack of the key activity going on across the service, both the business as usual and, of course, work that's the result of the COVID pandemic. I just want to pick up a few items, if I may, and give some updates to all committee members. Starting first with paragraphs 2 to 8 on page 17 and 18, it sets out some of the COVID-related work the service has been doing, including in ongoing project to ensure face coverings and hand sanitizer on offer in shops in the county are fit for purpose. And just to say, with regards to paragraph 8 on page 18, we proposed that we'd be going out to do some visits to retailers in the county. And just to update members that we have conducted some visits already, and we've also already found some problems regarding face coverings. So those that are offering a lower standard of protection than as described. So they were described as surgical masks, but actually offer a lower protection, so now only can be described as a face covering. So we've seized 1,000 masks so far. So I'll keep members updated on that topic as we go forward. On page 18, paragraph 9 onwards, gave an update regarding nitrous oxide. Just to add to that there is work going on with public health colleagues and across community safety partnerships on the topic, including the recent development of a Help Your Mate campaign that's been developed by our substance misuse partner, Change, Grow, Live. And that's aimed of the issue of taking such substances at what's so-called the quarantine raves. Media releases were being developed at the end of August. They may have gone out. I need to check up on that, but I can provide more of a detailed update in our next report for the committee. If I can move to paragraph 17 on page 19 regarding trading standards income. At the time of writing, we predicted we would deliver 458,000 of our 729k target, a shortfall, all due to COVID, of 271k. Since the report, we have managed to secure some further work and reduce the gap to 200,000 for this year. So we are moving in the right direction. We'll clearly continue to pursue other opportunities and again keep the committee updated as we make progress. If I could then move on to the community section of the report. So on page 20, paragraph 33 onwards, where I'll talk about the 2 COVID-related funds. I must start with giving some apologies. Unfortunately, there's a couple of errors in this section of the report. Firstly, in paragraph 33, it states that 216 projects were supported through the County Council COVID-19 fund. That should read 247. And the second error is that paragraph 36 and 37 should be swapped, because paragraph 36 on the food and essentials grant has been inserted partway through the community fund update. Okay, so apologies for that, but let me just start by talking about the County Council's £1 million fund. So that's, say, referred to in paragraphs 33, 34, 35 and 37. So far, 247 awards to the value of 668,000 have been made, and all that money has gone out. The applications have slowed down to 1 or 2 a week only, and it's been that way for a number of weeks now. And as the report describes, there is also a new government fund set out at paragraph 36 on food and essentials that provides funding for similar schemes. So as such, the report proposes that the County Council scheme is closed to applications as of 2 weeks from today, so on the 17th of September. With regards to the local authority emergency assistance grant, just to say that we've now designed a process to administer this funding in consultation with local resilience forum partners. We've earmarked 20% of it for the clinically extremely vulnerable if there are local lockdowns, and also 20% we've sort of kept back at the moment for targeted intervention should that be needed to redress any imbalance that may occur. The remaining 60%, which totals 463k, we've had £375,000 worth of applications so far, and we're currently working through those, and we'll keep people updated, keep members updated on that one. If I can move on to paragraph 38 on page 21. Talented Athletes Fund members will recall that 28,000 has been allocated per annum for this will be the 3rd year, and that's to contribute up to £400 to support talented athletes. This report proposes to open the 2021 round of applications in November. And then at paragraph 39, excellent news there in terms of the end of July, we were notified by the Ministry of Defence that the County Council has been awarded the Gold Award Employer Recognition Scheme. Previously, the authority had silver, but this is really recognition of the efforts to support the Armed Forces family by the council, and it's testimony to the hard work and commitment of a number of members and officers across the council on this subject. And just finally, not in the report, but just to say that the County Council played a central role in commemorating the end of World War II in the Far East by celebrating victory in Japan Day 75 on the 15th of August. The chairman and leader represented the council and were involved in a wreath-laying ceremony on the embankment and also a church service in the city. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'll just confirm to you as well the changes that you've made and alterations. Noel, the clerk, has said he will incorporate those into the minutes of the meeting. So thank you for that. I have Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll put my hand down as well. So we're all in. So firstly, no, thank you, Mark, for that report, and particularly for bringing up the event on the embankment. I know Ashfield Council was proud to come with our Vice Chairman, Councillor Arnie Hankin, and also Councillor Gascoigne, who served many tours for our country, and he's our Armed Forces champion. So he's a bit of a hero down at Ashfield Council, but it's really great to be able to incorporate them in the event, and I thank the County Council for putting on, frankly, a well-organised event. My concern then now turns to, I have it on good faith that the leader of the council had final sign-off on these applications, and I'd just like to understand exactly what involvement the leader of the council had in these applications, and then the final figure of how many unsuccessful applications there were across the Mansfield and Ashfield area and what they totalled. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hollis. Adrian, do you want to come back on that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we can certainly provide details of the applications that we've received, something that's been discussed regularly at the COVID-19 Resilience, Recovery and Renewal Committee, but no reason we can't provide other members with updated information. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Councillor Lawton, you've shown your hand. Thank you.
You're on
mute. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you, Adrian. Don't provide me with the information. I trust that you've been running the fund effectively and efficiently and fair. Mine's a comment to Mark, really. Mark, as part and parcel of the Governance and Ethics Committee, we scrutinise the Electoral Divisions Initiative Fund run through councillors, where they get £5,000 a year. And I've spoken to the leader on this. One or two councillors, well, more than one or two, there's about half a dozen who effectively jumped the gun, really, over the community funds and supported their communities by using their Electoral Division Initiative Fund to fund COVID-related issues within their communities. Now, they are being disenfranchised, basically, because they were quick off the mark to get funds out into their communities, and they therefore can't fund other issues because of that. And what we're saying is, I've spoken to the leader about this, is that some of the money, or a small proportion of the money that is in that communities fund, left in that communities fund, should be vied across to compensate them so that they can get their full £5,000 to be able to support community events within their areas and divisions. Thank you.
I'm having microphone problem there, but we're okay. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Do you want to come back on that, Mark, at all? I mean,
if the committee wishes that to happen, then yeah, very, very happy we can make that happen. That's obviously a member decision there. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not biased on that, but a large percentage of mine did go straight to the community to help with food and stuff like that. So, be interesting to see what the outcome of that is. Is there any other speak? Oh, Councillor Guilfoyle, I can see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll declare my interest in that item as well that's just been mentioned, and would welcome, obviously, that being replaced. Yeah, just on the a number of issues, the personal protective equipment, I'm very glad that we've been doing works around that, but I'm very upset that people would take advantage of the situation at this particular time. But there again, we shouldn't be surprised about the number of unscrupulous people that are out there and will do anything to make a buck. But you know, in reality, when they're providing materials that don't say what it, you know, what it is on the tin, don't do what it says is on the tin, then we should take them. And I would hope that we're not just advising these really do need to be prosecuted for this, because you know they could also be putting lives at risk. I wondered whether we're doing anything in relation to making the public aware of what they need to look for. And I know some of the stuff is very difficult because clearly, like many scams that are done relating to clothing and other things, you know, it sometimes does take a professional eye to actually pick up what is a problem. But I'm just wondering if there is any way in which we can, you know, put out a press release for people to just purchase from reputable places. And I would ask also, you know, were there any reputable places that we, you know, that have been duped as well? Because that can make a bigger concern. You know, I don't want to mention high street shops that are selling them, but you know, I would have confidence if I was going to an high street shop to purchase a face mask and some. You would expect that they have carried out all the due diligence, etc. I wouldn't have that same confidence if I was shopping on eBay, Amazon, or whatever else in reality. So I just wonder if there's something that we can put out there as a press release just to make people aware of some of the difficulties. The other one was yes, to highlight the impact that the assistance grant, the community fund has had in particular in my area. I know the people who have put in and the good work that they've done to spend that money and make sure it's gone to some really deserving cases that would have struggled during this particular time. And I'm really glad that we've, as a council, been able to very early on, because that was also very important, very early on, put that deal there. So, you know, whatever political persuasion, I'm sure we should be thankful that that has been done, and also to the officers, because for them to have to administer a fund, it's very difficult when we have any fund, but when you're trying to give it to groups and stick to a criteria, I know it's very difficult. And I also welcome the money that the government have given us, and hopefully we need to be. I'd like to see a copy, if members could be supplied with a copy of the sort of what they need to the boxes to tick to enable them to get some of that money, because that will help us pass that information out to the groups that we work with. And then finally, just on the fact that we've been given the recognised with the Gold Award of Armed Forces, and I know members are involved. I was involved from the beginning when that scheme first set up and went to the meetings, but the person that was at the side of the main stay of that, and that's Neil Bettison, who works within the community department. I think all praise should actually go to Neil, who is a former veteran, for all the hard work that he's done, not just in this, in achieving the Gold Award, so to a lot of the work that he does throughout and has done throughout the years in supporting veterans right across the county. I know he's very well known. It's something that is very close to his heart, and he puts more time in than perhaps what we pay him for. And really, the accolade really ought to go to him, I'm sure.
Thank you, Glyn, and thank you for that. And I would echo that. I think the whole committee would like to pass on our thanks to Neil and the team for the hard work that they've put in. So thank you for saying those words. Mark, would you like to come back at all?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, regarding PPE and face coverings and face masks, etc. I think it's absolutely a valid point there in terms of we need to get some media messages out to warn the public. It's a bit of a toxic combination of complex legislation here and also the market being absolutely flooded at the start with this sort of stuff. And you know, there's a mix of sort of UK legislation and Chinese standards as well that are getting mixed up now, etc., etc. So certainly we need to design. We will put something together, a media release with some simple messages in that communicates to the public, because these masks are on sale in all sorts of places. The 1,000 masks we've seized were seized from a shoe shop of all places. So, you know, it's a bit of a problem at the moment, which means that whilst we would prosecute those that we, in line with our enforcement policy, who are deliberately doing it, the market has been absolutely flooded. So we've been doing it more through advice and action, getting people to take it off display, etc. Regarding the Communities Fund, thank you for that feedback. I will pass your thanks on, Councillor Guilfoyle, to the officers concerned with administering that. With regards to the Food and Essentials grant, a copy of the criteria, I believe all the information is online, but I will check and I'll make sure I share that with the committee members, though. And then finally, the Gold Award. Yes, Neil has put a lot of effort into this, a lot of hard work. He has had other support, and clearly there's been people, for example, in human resources as well, that have got those, you know, armed forces family-friendly policies that they. So it has been a big team effort. But you're absolutely right. Neil has driven it with passion and commitment. So I will pass your words on to Neil. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I've got Councillor Greaves now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can I congratulate Mark on the, paragraph 6, personal protective equipment. We really need to be on the ball with this. Because it doesn't take long for unscrupulous firms to get onto the bandwagon, as we all know. And I think Mark's done a good job here. Maybe we ought to hire him out to the government, who's paid millions out to firms that's paid millions of pounds and that produce a mask. I think he'd find his work invaluable. And can I ask, can I also congratulate him on the nitrous oxide question? I raised it at the last committee, and thanks for bringing this forward, Mark. And I think, would it not be useful to hand out leaflets to schools because of youngsters using this? I mean, as all as councillors know, we go around our wards and we see these little vessels kicking about all over the place. Do we actually go to schools and leaflets out there warning children on this sort of thing, of the dangers of taking this nitrous oxide, which is, well, in my ward actually, it's a plague. You see it going around your parks, your children's parks, and you see these little containers kicking about all over the place. And I think, we really need to be informing youngsters, catching them at an early age at schools and informing them of the dangers of this. Also, paragraph 31, illicit tobacco. We see time and time again the same firms coming up. How many times do these same firms get prosecuted? Time and time again, but we see them keep coming back all the time. If they know other weapon that we've got in this toolbox, banning them and selling tobacco altogether is the question. And paragraph 39, well, it goes without saying, congratulations on this to all concerned with the Armed Forces Gold Award. A job well done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. Mark, do you want to come back on that, please?
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Greaves. I'll get more information regarding the campaign that's been developed around nitrous oxide, it's an information and education campaign aimed at young people on the dangers of nitrous oxide and also how they should look after each other if they do enter into this high risk activity. But I'll ask the question, and I say put an update in the next report, if I may, Councillor Greaves, regarding your specific question around leaflets to schools or information to schools. So I'll take that one away, if I may. In terms of illicit tobacco, when you say when it's the same firms, there may be the same premises involved, but there may well be different people involved. So there might be different legal entities. So although the premises might come up on a few occasions, it might be different people actually behind the organisation. Now, what that means is, and you know, we try to develop new approaches to put pressure on landlords to make sure that there's no illegal, unlawful activity going on from the premises that they occupy. Because of course, you know, we have Proceeds of Crime Act, where we can look at, you know, technically landlords might be receiving, you know, money from proceeds of crime, and so we can use other levers like that. But what I can say is we constantly review tactics in order to stop getting repeat offenders coming through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. There's a hand up with Councillor Hollis. I'm not keeping going back to people, Tom, for then a long debate second time round. If you want to ask a quick question, I'm happy for you to do that.
This is not even a question. This is
to
highlight in the recommendations. I'm happy to support this item. The Ashfield Independents are. If we could just make clear in the recommendations that all members of the committee will receive all applications received for the COVID fund, successful and unsuccessful, potentially broken down by areas so members don't have to choose everything. But if that recommendation is included, I'd happily support it. Thank you.
I'm not changing the recommendations, Tom, but I will guarantee that you get the information.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay. Right. So then we go to the vote. If there's no other speakers, I'm just checking. No, there are no other speakers. So any member against the recommendations? Can't see any. Thank you. Are any abstentions against the recommendations? Then I propose that the votes are unanimous unless anybody says otherwise in the next few seconds. Thank you very much. That's moved then. Thank you. I'm very jealous of Pauline, by the way. I don't know what was in your sandwich, Pauline, but my tummy's rumbling. So I'm very jealous. Okay, we're going to move on then. So item 7 is cycling in Nottinghamshire, and I'm going to propose the recommendations before I ask Sean Parks to propose the paper. Number 1 is propose priorities for future investment in cycling as set out in paragraphs 12 to 13. Recommendation 2 is incorporation of local transport note 1/20 cycle infrastructure design standards into the County Council's existing highway designs principles. Number 3 is delivery of the proposed EATF Tranche 2 programme should funding be secured for its delivery. Item 4, further investigation and potential expressions of interest into the Mini Holland programme. Item 5 on the recommendations, further development work and delivery of the cycling schemes included in the Transforming Cities Fund bid, as detailed in paragraphs 29 to 31, subject to Policy Committee approval on the 30th of September 2020. And the last recommendation, number 6, approve the proposed consultation and information provision required to deliver each of the schemes and work programmes detailed in this report. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll happily second that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I go to Sean Parks, please. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I say the purpose of this report is to seek committee approval for a number of cycling-related matters which are aiming to try and sustain the recent increases we've seen in cycling across the county, and also, importantly, to help secure future funding for investment in those or in our cycling networks. The proposed priorities for the future cycling infrastructure investment, as detailed in the report, are based on the delivery of Council's existing strategies and commitments, particularly those relating to the economy, environment and health and well-being. DFT has stated that authorities will need to demonstrate that they've considered their new cycling design principles, LTN 120, in both cycling and non-cycling schemes in order to secure future funding from them. So that's why it's been proposed that they are incorporated into our existing highway design principles whenever possible, that is, obviously. The council is still awaiting confirmation of its final allocation of the Emergency Active Travel Fund EATF Tranche 2 allocation, but the report is seeking approval for delivery of those proposals should we secure that funding. It should also be noted that obviously consultation with all of the affected members, but also public and equality impact assessments will still need to be undertaken on those should we get that funding. And the report, in terms of the mini Hollands, I just wanted to explain that obviously the report is seeking approval to undertake further investigation into this. The reason being is there is a potential funding source there. By just undertaking this investigation, it means that then obviously we'll be able to update committee on what is actually being asked of the council should we be involved in that, which will give them the opportunity then to make an informed decision on whether they want to progress with that or not. And as it states, the Transforming Cities Fund is still subject to future approval at a policy committee meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, obviously, cycling has become a major issue across Britain in the last few years, and clearly we all know that our infrastructure doesn't cater for it, and there's always been that dichotomy between cars and bikes, and the way that car drivers sometimes don't like to see cycles on the road, complain, and I think that, you know, we really do need to get to grips with this, and I think we can do what we can as a local authority, but I actually really linking this on to the next paper, think that we actually need a new national framework around cycling and walking as well. I think that here we are trying to redesign networks that are sometimes very old, sometimes very difficult to do, and sometimes create something that probably isn't really safe, but we do it because we think, well, you know, we've complied with what the public want. We've put a white line down the road that allows cyclists to have a little portion of the highway. My view is we've got to look at new build, and we ought to be asking government to, on the design of new estates, to look at implementing Mini Holland on new estates as a starter, because what happens, as you know, there are new estates going up all around Nottinghamshire, and not one will have catered for cycling. And I think that we're missing probably one of the biggest opportunities. You know, there's been a lot of talk, and there are a lot of development sites coming through currently, and I think we should be asking government to specify that this should be considered by all developers. The first, you know, conception when they put plans in, and for walkers as well, you know, because that's important. If anybody's been to, I've got a friend who lives in Maastricht, and I used to go regularly, not as much these days, but a year or so ago, and it's fantastic the way they've separated out, but they've done it from design status over the years, where the way that they separate out cycles from traffic, the traffic signals cater for them and everything else. But as I say, it's done within the design specifications. They wouldn't think of building an estate without catering for cyclists. So I think we've got to, at the same time as doing these things for the here and now, you know, what we've also got to do is look for the future, and I think we ought to be lobbying government on that in particular. And if you want somewhere to do a mini Holland, as I said in our group, with all the flooding that's been taking place in Bassett Law recently, then I'm sure that we would stand up to be a mini Holland anyway.
Thank you very much. Sean, do you want to come back on any of those? No?
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
I will say that effectively the adoption of LTN 120 will go some way, I think, to addressing Councillor Guilfoyle's concerns, because what that's stating effectively is that they do incorporate some of those designs as part of Mini Holland, so that we would feed that back. Now, obviously, as a council, we are consulted on highways matters on new developments anyway, and we try to get those cycling and walking infrastructure implemented as part of those. Now, obviously, if we've adopted this as our design standards, then that's something that we can then pass back to developers stating these are the council's current design standards, so we would want those incorporated into any future developments. So hopefully this will help overcome some of your concerns.
Chairman, just on that.
Yes, okay.
It really does need info, because usually, and it's like a lot of things where we developer contributions to anything, it normally ends up being an either or. Well, you know, and you know the issue. We either come up and they go, "Oh, we can't afford to give you the money for the school because we're doing this," and we end up with this. Or we'll design this, but you don't get that. And I actually think that it really does need, you know, firm principles. And a clear example of that is Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act. They only have to take it into account. They don't have to fulfil it. So when you ask them to do things, it's like, oh, well, you know, it doesn't really get enforced. So we really need some teeth behind it that sort of says, it's no good designing any estate or anything without this being included.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just have, sorry, trouble on muting. Yeah, I agree with obviously a lot of what Glyn said, and with local planning changing at the moment, and 106 is going back to that could be a problem. But just to, I'm going to mention something on the next one, so I'll leave it for them. But don't forget as well, to get bicycles off the road, there are other issues with other apartments, like Network Rail, for argument's sake. We've got bridges crossing from Carlton to Netherfield, things like this, which are not bike friendly, in fact, not pushchair friendly. So to actually help, we have to remember getting the bikes safely off the highways is actually a very useful thing. In the area around here, it's actually in the city, but very close to me, there's a bit of old railway line, and some of the bikes through there, and they've done the same. That's the same railway. When it comes to actually implementing the bike policy, it's important to remember it's not literally just the highways. If we can take them off the highways in a shortcut, not a long cut, then that must be a useful addendum added to it. So I apologise here, but it's not just the highways. If we want biking, and we do want biking, we want safe biking as well. So as long as that doesn't forget, it only concentrates literally on highways. It needs to actually apply to the edges of the highways, shortcuts, and as Gil said, design would be brilliant. National government should actually take a hand on this and enforce an X amount of cycling or footpaths in local developments. Agree with it. So I think it could go just that little bit further. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I would say that the government has started something and brought it forward, which governments before haven't done. And the one thing we do have is what you've already been saying, is that the infrastructure isn't there, and also it's the cost of putting it in as well. So we do need a combination of different ways to achieve some of those things. I've got Councillor Richard Butler. I'm going to go through everybody who wants to speak, Sean, and then if you want to come back at the end. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if I may, I'm just going to big up a part of my area, building on what's just been said, because 4 or 5 years ago, we had the new Hollygate Park development built in Cockrave, and as part of that, we had a 106 requirement commitment for improved pedestrian and cycle links, and as a result, we had the towpath alongside the Grantham Canal upgraded into a suitable surface, which is absolutely ideal for cyclists as well as pedestrians, and has a direct link to the new development, so people can actually cycle from that development along the Grantham Canal towards West Bridgeford and Nottingham. So that's an example of some work that has been done in the past. But I do agree there is need for more. I think it's a bit unfortunate that the Prime Minister, bless him, and the government perhaps got a little bit over enthusiastic in the early stages of COVID when they were talking about all this money that was going to be found for cycling, because as we've all observed, there has been an increase in the number of cyclists out and about because people are at home more. It was nice weather, of course, as well for a lot of the time. But of course, it's built up a lot of expectations. And despite this big fund, or this very big fund that's been granted from government to local authorities, it's not going to provide everything that people want. So, I mean, I know there's been in my area, and I'm sure other colleagues as well, there's been a lot of lobbying from residents and cycling groups for us to do something to take advantage of this funding. And as ever with these things, as we've seen in the list in the report, there are some suggestions, but no doubt there are quite a few that have not made the report. So how are we deciding which suggested requested schemes to take forward for possible inclusion in such funding, whether it's part of the government funding or indeed it's funding that we miraculously gather from somewhere?
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor, is my microphone on? It is. I'm going to Councillor Greaves, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, you know where I'm going to come from with this, Chairman. It's the A57 in my ward in Worksop, which I have 3,000 plus residents of no access to any footpath or cycle path for that matter along the A57 to four massive industrial. At the moment, I have asked for a 70 mile an hour speed limit to be reduced, but that has been denied by your committee. And there's two lengths of 70 mile an hour speed limits along the A57 in Worksop, and we're asking cyclists to cycle alongside of traffic flowing 70 miles an hour. Now this is intolerable. And also, as you know, Chairman, I put forward a programme and had the money for a footpath stroke cycle path along the A57, which yourself took away when you became in. So I'm saying if we're serious about this, we do need to be putting these cycle paths and footpaths in work on the A57 and along the A57 a little bit to my colleagues at Civil Fielding's ward. We've got another 70 mile an hour stretch there with around about 700 kilometres being built there. So people have very little access to cycle in the industrial estates, but going to work or even when they go to the supermarkets along this road, which we've got another one coming up soon under the Subies, Workshop, as you do know, and it's very disturbing to see children walking at the side in the grass at the side of the road, walking against traffic and flowing 70 miles an hour. And you see mothers with prams and pushing through the long grass, children along the side of traffic moving at 70 miles an hour with no protection. There's no protection here. They're just having to walk up the grass verge that should have been a footpath. But it was taken away, and it's disturbing to see that. And I invite you to come and have a look at this in Worksop. And this should never be open. Or at least have the speed reduction, because the speed reduction that I put forward to 50 mile an hour, like it is at the other side of Worksop, it's 50 mile an hour in the countryside either side and 70 mile an hour going through, which is ridiculous. And I asked for that to be reduced to 50 to make it safe, to make it safe for cyclists and people willing to walk at the side of the, with no footpath, walk at the side of the road. But I'm calling on you now to have a look at this and get this put forward. It's long overdue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. Obviously, what you were saying is a concern to you, but you refused the alternative that was offered. And as of the 70 mile an hour, I don't know where that sits or who's responded to you, but I'm happy to look into it. But certainly the funding wasn't in place because we took over control in 2017, so it wasn't funded properly. It was very expensive to do. And with the shortness of money that we inherited, then we had to look at the priorities to be given. I'm going to hand back to Sean to see if any of the comments that were made by other members, he wishes to make any comment. Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few things. I think, Councillor Guilford, just to go back to your original question about the development, and obviously we are key in trying to get the infrastructure put in place. But what we also have to recognise is our limitations currently under the current planning system, in that whilst we ask for the developments to include X, Y, and Z, ultimately it is the planning authority, which is the district council, who make the decisions on what is provided. In terms of Councillor Creamer and also Councillor Greaves' request, and to an extent also Councillor Butler's, how we decide which schemes were put forward. In terms of Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which is the only elements of this 5 billion funding which DfT have announced that has been made available to date, obviously we have to be mindful of what the criteria are for those, which meant that we couldn't put in some of the schemes that we think, potentially we would like to develop across the county. So we are always dependent on what the funding sources criteria is. That helps determine what we actually put forward. But at the same time we do recognise the need for multi-user routes, as we call them, whether that's at Calverton or in Gedling, because they're ones people often use for leisure and health reasons, and that is one of the criteria obviously that we're trying to deliver in terms of council strategy. Just to, in terms of actual going forward, how we're going to prioritise those routes, the intention is obviously we received hundreds and hundreds of requests for cycling schemes when the funding was announced. Our intention is obviously for members to determine which ones they want us to progress and look into further within their patches. We're going to collate those and then obviously ask the affected members which ones they would like us to look into, they support. The local cycling walking infrastructure plan, which is the next report, actually is a route utilisation tool which helps us identify potential routes, but also demonstrate the need for those routes. And we intend to use that in order to have a transparent way of comparing, for example, schemes in Bassetlaw to schemes in Gedling to schemes in Ashfield to wherever, to see which ones we think actually have the greatest potential to get more people cycling and deliver those strategic opportunities. So yeah, we will be contacting you about any schemes that we have received requests for, to see if you still support those. I think that's it. Oh, one other thing regarding Councillor Creamer, when he was talking about safety and making sure people get off the roads. One of the key design features that within the new guidance from DfT is segregation from traffic. So we're no longer talking about white lines on road. That's effectively it pretty much states that there should be segregation from traffic. Also, similarly, they're talking about segregation when it's adjacent to the highway from pedestrians as well. So that actually it does cause a difficulty, because obviously, as Councillor Guilfoyle also said, we are very constrained in terms of the highway width, which limits then where we can actually deliver them, which was a key thing when we were looking at what went into Tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, because an awful lot of the schemes we looked into were simply not feasible or deliverable within this very short timescales. Hopefully I've answered everybody's inquiries.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other speakers, so we'll move to the vote. Any member objecting, voting against? No, I can't see anyone. Any abstentions? No, so I take it that that's a unanimous decision. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, it's an hour and a half into the meeting, so we need to move on. We've got item 8, which is the D2N2 Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, and the recommendation is on page 42. And it's recommendation 1, strategic objectives for the overall local cycling and walking infrastructure plan are set out in paragraph 12. Recommendation 2 is provisional short-term priority cycling programmes subject to the provisions set out in paragraphs 26 to 29 and approval of the Transforming City Fund elements by Policy Committee. Recommendation 3 is corridors for further feasibility and conceptual design to be undertaken by Sustran as detailed in paragraph 22, and recommendation 4 is walking investment programmes as set out in paragraphs 23 to 25. I'm looking for a seconder, please.
Happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sean, I'm over to you again, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report very much overlaps with the last one, and the purpose of this report is to seek provisional committee approval for the D2N2 Local Cycling Walking Infrastructure Plan, which is referred to as the LCWIP, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a route selection tool helping to identify and demonstrate the need for potential cycling improvements. DFT is encouraging all highway authorities to develop an LCWIP, and DFT's recent pro forma to bid for EATF cycle funding already includes questions on the role the LCWIP had in identifying the bid proposals. So we know it's something they're going to want going forward. The current priorities that are set out within the report are solely based on delivery of strategic objectives and the level of feasibility that's been undertaken on some of those routes to date. That's why we only want provisional approval at this moment in time, because it's considered that we still need some additional work to be undertaken, which is already underway on the priorities, which is proposed that the final version of the LCWIP and also the Nottinghamshire's priorities will be presented to a future committee for consideration and approval in more detail when that work has been completed, so that we can have a more transparent, consistent prioritisation of those routes. But we're seeking provisional approval at this time because it will enable us to undertake further feasibility work on some of those schemes, which will help us get to a position where so we can bid for future funding should the opportunities arise before we finalise that report. Could I also point out a typo in the report in paragraph 22, which refers to feasibility work offered by DFT and Sustrans? Bullet point 2, item 2, it should read Alresworth to Ilkeston via Bennerley Viaduct, not Annesley Viaduct. That was a typo. I'm not aware there actually is an Annesley Viaduct, in all honesty. So I just wanted to make that correction. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sean. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Creamer, thank you.
Just a comment, rather, as it's a provisional one. Just a question as well. When we're working in the Greater Nottingham area, which is page 37, paragraph 14, it does mention the areas around them, and I just wondered how close we will be working with the city. In my case, in the Gedling, Broxtowe, Rustcliffe area. Just how close we'll be working with the city on routes, and just a very general thing as well. Are the priorities and the guidelines exactly the same as the previous item? So that was it. Just a very simple one. Just how closely are we actually working with our boundary neighbours? I mean, I'll let the Mansfields and all the rest answer their own bits, but it is important around in this area because most people in Carlton area would actually work in the city. And that's where they want to actually go. So how closely are we working? Assume the same in Broxtowe.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Creamer. I think, is my microphone on? Yes, it is. Sean, do you want to come back on that one, please?
Yep, thank you. To be honest, yes, the guidelines in the previous report should and do tally with this one. But how close we're working with our neighbouring authorities, one of the reasons we wanted to determine a D2N2 wide were the two main purposes of actually having a D2N2 wide one. The first one is funding opportunities, effectively we recognise that some of that may come through the LEP, or when we started it definitely was coming through the LEP. So we wanted to make sure that we had a consistent one across all authorities. But one of the key things was actually looking at those cross-boundary links. And you'll notice that probably on the majority of the priorities that are in there, we have prioritised those cross-boundary links because all of the authorities benefit from them. So it is looking at routes into the city and likewise out of the city to our industrial estates, for example, Sneinton and along the likes in Gedling. But also then going along sort of like the northwest, so Mansfield boundary, where there's a lot of cross-boundary movements between there and Derbyshire. And similarly then effectively, what we want to do is once we've done that is then look at the cross boundaries, even sort of like the north across to Sheffield and to Lincolnshire in the east and south into Leicestershire. So yeah, definitely the intention is that they are a priority within that.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on then, please. We'll go to the vote, please. Anybody voting against the recommendation? I don't see anybody. Anybody abstaining? Okay, thank you. I take it that we've agreed unanimously then on the recommendations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. And just to give a heads up, item 10, the new Rushcliffe Recycling Centre, I've withdrawn that paper from today. I need to have a look at some of the information that's within it. It's not correct. And I want to make sure that when it comes back next month, it is correct. So that paper will not be discussed today. So that's just to give the flood risk management update. Notice that they're coming straight after the next item, which is item 9, which is recommendations on highways environmental matters. And the recommendation is it's recommended that committee accept the recommendations contained in paragraphs 3 to 7 above, being the recommendations of the Communities and Place Review and Development Committee, and that a further report with detailed, specific, costed proposals for the various elements of the report is presented to committee for consideration during 2020. I'll pass over to Gary Wood. Thank you. Oh, I want to second it, don't I?
I'll second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Councillor Wheeler, do you want to say anything or afterwards or before, or as it came to your committee?
Sorry, John, I'm having a problem.
Okay. You've gone off again. Go on.
Once more.
Okay. Yep.
Am I unmuted? No, I don't think I am yet, am I?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Why am I? Okay, yep. Thank you, John. Much appreciated. If Gary goes first, I'd like to say something after Gary's been, please. John, if that's okay with you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've heard, this paper is bringing recommendations from the CPRD committee, which covers grass cutting, wildflower planting, weed spraying and tree maintenance. And as we've heard, the report seeks permission to bring a further report with detailed costings this year. So many of these maintenance activities are currently delivered by VIA, and Doug Coots is in committee today, and myself, and we'll be able to answer any questions that councillors have on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, John. I would. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Gary, for that. The committee I chair has discussed this at some length. We've looked at what neighbouring authorities are doing, how we could do things differently, could be better or otherwise. The thoughts of the committee are set out quite clearly in the paper that Gary just referred to. We will be working to improve our environmental aspect for those groups who have far more expertise and experience than we have. So it's work in progress, and Gary just said it's costings have got to emerge, and they will emerge as we go forward. That's probably all for now, though, Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you to officers for the hard work in putting it all together.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. So there is a paper coming back in more detail, but are there any questions from members? Councillor Tom Hollis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a direct question to the officers, really. I know our local member, Councillor John Wilmot's had a lot of complaints still about Thoresby Dale with concerning residents. And I just wondered if the officers could provide an update on the situation there, obviously with the torrential rain we've just had. Thank you.
Gary, do you want to just come back on that one?
That
You say it's in the next paper, apparently. So we'll pick that up there. Okay. Councillor Greaves, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of good news stories in here. And one is paragraph 3. I'm glad to see that the reduced cutting frequency is returning back. But we did say that when it was first brought forward, if you remember. And it was just a matter of storing up problems for later, actually. I mean, with the spread of ragwort, birch, sycamore, which is trees that are easily seeded, and obviously ragwort, which is poisonous to all animals, especially horses and cows, I imagine. So I'm glad to see that is now being dropped, but we did say so. And we're going back to regular cutting that we did before. And also another good news story that on wildflowers, paragraph 5, yeah, I'm glad you're going to look at carrying on where we started with the planting of wildflowers, which was well accepted by people. When I was chair, I got many comments about how people were pleased to see the planting of wildflowers because they are nice. They are nice to see. They're good for the environment. They're good for the wildlife. So I'm glad about that. Regarding trees, tree maintenance, well, I do have problems in my area, and I know Glenn will be saying, with tree roots on streets, on footpaths, creating problems with walkers. I know in middle of town, where my ward is, people have, it's blighted people's lives actually with roots that grow and push the pavement up and make it very difficult for walkers, elderly, and also wheelchair users. It's a blight sometimes, and it's unavoidable in towns, and of course all the maintenance that the cost that goes along with it, with pathways. So yeah, some good news stories in there, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Greaves. I'm going to go through all the speakers and then ask Gary if he wants to come back. So, Councillor Creamer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go along with that, but particularly on the wildflowers and the weed spraying, we did ask. I can't remember if that was last year, certainly some time ago, on whether we would consider actually the bees, for instance, on our programmes, bee corridors and wildflowers, things like that. So it's just a little bit disappointing. It hasn't come in this one, but then again, it was supposed to be a different committee that dealt with it. So I wonder if anything's going to come in the future on, for instance, bee corridors, etc. And the weed spraying does concern me a little bit. I'm not an expert, but the committee advised that the use of glyphosate manufacturers. Well, there's new evidence coming out all the time, only last week, about smaller effects on bees. That it doesn't actually kill them, but it stops them doing their work. So they die later on. It doesn't kill them directly. So I'm just wondering if we can actually increase the importance of our environmental side of actually looking into bee corridors and the effects. I'm not on bee spraying, so I'll leave it as it said, but can we have a review as weed killers are actually identified for having different effects than just killing weeds? And I don't know if manufacturing, the advice may change or may not. But yeah, it's a good report. The tree maintenance, I will agree as well. No particular problem with that if it's in the right place. Top of Carlton Hill in my patch, we've got several trees, shopping area, fine. Well, a couple of yards or more between the tree and the shop, and another yard or so between the the road, so plenty of room for people to pass. Other parts of my patch, you can barely walk past. So as long as it's done sensitive, right places and sensitively, as it already said, district council trying to help, I've no problems with it. But we're a very hilly area. I wouldn't like to see too many trees actually making hills impassable for pedestrians. Particularly as now more and more people in this area. If you go to the top of Carlton Hill, you can see more and more people on these little scooters, and it's getting tighter and tighter for them because some of them are getting quite wide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. I say there's more detailed information coming later on, so to another report. I'm going to Councillor Guilfoyle, and then I've got Councillor John Ogle.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, Kevin alluded to the issue that I was going to raise, which is about tree maintenance, and I welcome the short video that's going to be done, because the public do get frustrated about the number of times that we don't prune trees. They want us to cut them back further, or don't want us to cut them. And the video will explain hopefully why we do what we do, and I think that's very important. I know that the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, is very, very keen on seeing the planting of trees across the area. I mean, he's come out and said it, and I support that. I support in general that we need to put more trees into the ground in specific areas. But my only concern is, and that's through years of being a councillor for the area, where I've got 1, 2, 3, probably four tree-lined areas, and the number of complaints that I get relating to other problems, highway problems, where the trees have lifted up the footpaths. People who have got disability chairs can't get over safely. If they've got back injuries, it causes a problem for them. And I think that if we're doing that, and also from people who move into properties and then come back on the tree cutting down, because all the leaves that are in there, and also then the leaves that go into the gully, block the drains and everything else. So there's a multitude of factors that I think we've got to take into account, which is why I'm more in favour of creating more, say, open spaces within community, and putting within those open spaces more trees. Or in fact, I mean, within Nottinghamshire, we've got one of the most famous avenues in the world, possibly, you know, Lime Tree Avenue in Clumber, which is absolutely fantastic. From my point of view, you know, we should be doing more of that in areas where perhaps it's not going to destroy footpaths and things like that. And I know that, you know, it's that balance that we've got to have clearly. But as I say, most of my summer and prior is receiving calls from residents, either who live with trees in front of their properties complaining about them, or people who are having to access the footpath and it's made more difficult for them, and trips and slips. And there is a substantial amount of impact that has on the highway budget, because in some cases we're going out every year to dig roots up and resurface every year, not just, you know, oh, we'll do that, we've left it. It's every year, and that is a substantial cost to the council. So yeah, I'm a tree lover, want to see them, but I think we've got to be very careful about the settings and where we place them.
Thanks, Glyn. Councillor Ogle, and then Gary will come back at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I
Councillor
know
Wheeler
there's
as
a
well.
more detailed report to come, and that, for instance, the wildflowers is going to be introduced in an incremental fashion. But I just wanted to say that up at Eaton and Gamston Woods, Notts County Council used to do the contract work for those wildflowers. They used to remove the grass, and I see it's being done more efficiently by machinery now. But I think if you're doing wildflowers, you need to look at the most efficient way of getting that grass off, because you can't use agricultural machinery. I know in the old days, they used to use forks. They just used to fork it up, and it was very labour intensive. Now, the other thing is, there's also, the county council does things properly, and by going through the sequence of events, it's done properly, but it also costs a lot of money. There's more than one way of skinning a cat. And for instance, I used some of these grass clippings because I worked with the county council chaps. I used some of these grass clippings on some of my grass strips, and it's quite successful. You might not get a super wildflower bloom the first year, but if the verges are appropriate and they're going to work, you get a few wildflowers. Sometimes those will seed, and they eventually you will get a better wildflower show. But you've got the grass is better removed because that lowers the fertility. But by using this cheap method, just taking your choppings off other wildflower areas, you can afford to just spread it about and see what comes, rather than getting a consultant and going through a number of hoops to do everything perfectly. By doing this method, it's a very cost-effective method of finding out without a lot of soil testing and other work exactly what will work. There's a conflict between the trees and the wildflowers because most wildflowers don't want shade, as contrasting with domestic flowers, which some of them will take shade. So that's what I wanted to, encourage that, rather than spend a lot of money when it's done, and you can incorporate that into the next report, Chairman.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move on now to ask Gary just to sum up, please, and then Gordon to make any comment he wishes afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cotty. So there's some useful information there from councillors that we'll take away and consider in working on a more detailed paper. I think it's true to say that tree planting is a balance, and mature trees do cause us headaches out on the network, so we'll think carefully about the planting locations of new trees. I think I agree with Councillor Guilfoyle about the video explainer, and that's something that we've taken forward in Highways. Producing explainer videos makes it easier with the public, and we will keep under review the glyphosate situation to see if there's a better alternative. In terms of the bee corridors, we have been talking to Notts Wildlife Trust around all of that. So next time we come back, we'll include it. I wonder, Councillor Creamer, whether we should have bee corridors on our sea roads only. But I'll leave you with that to think about and pass it back to John.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Wheeler. I'm just checking. Yeah, I'm on. You're not on at the moment. Yes, you are now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. I'm very pleased to say that John Ogle and Gary have largely covered what I was going to speak about, and particularly about the bee corridor, which I think is an excellent idea. We need to look at that to see if it's feasible, and we will do. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to move to the vote then. Anybody against the recommendations? I take that as a no. Any abstentions? Again, nobody showing. So I'm presuming, unless told in the next few seconds, that everybody agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. So my apologies to Emily Mail and Andrew Disney and Sue Jakes, who've waited for a long time. I'm afraid when I wasn't around when the papers were put together in order, and had I known, I would have put you at the beginning of the meeting. So my apologies for keeping you on for so long, but we've had some good debates on the subjects today. So item 11 is flood risk management update. I'd like to ask, recommendations. Recommendation 1 is that members consider whether there are any actions they require in relation to the report. And it's number 1 again. The committee endorses the work outlined in the report. 2, members approve the publishing of the updated flood risk management action plan. 3, committee engages all agencies involved to seek and implement suitable measures to alleviate flooding in Nottinghamshire as soon as reasonably possible. And 4, that members approve a request for funding in relation to the £1 million property flood resilience scheme outlined in paragraph 53 to be taken to Finance and Major Contracts Committee, Management Committee. I propose that and ask for a seconder, please.
Very happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll pass over to Sue Jakes. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. As lead local flood authority, I'm really pleased to be able to report that Nottinghamshire County Council is delivering on all its statutory duties and obligations under the Flood and Water Management Act. Since our last update to committee, we've continued responding to planning applications as a statutory consultee within the required 21 days. And in the last 6 months, the safeguarding of over 13,000 homes has been looked at as part of our planning responses. During lockdown, when it's been safe to do so, we've been out on site inspecting the 2,000 physical drainage features that we have a significant effect on flood risk across the county. And these features are the ones that are the core of the authority's flood risk asset register. The team have spent a considerable amount of time investigating internal flooding events and publishing Section 19 reports. This year, very sadly, we've seen over 350 properties internally flooded as a result of the significant rainfall events that we had in February, June and August, which generated 14 Section 19 reports. So since November, a significant amount of our time has been spent on the ground working with residents and businesses, both during and in the aftermath of these flooding events. We've handled over 700 localised reports of flooding from ordinary watercourses and runoff in the last 6 months. And with around the 1,600 miles of ordinary watercourse we have in the county, which is under the County Council's jurisdiction, we've been undertaking quite a significant amount of land drainage education with riparian owners and managing land drainage consent applications. To enhance our land drainage offer, we've commenced a compliance checking regime recently, which will support the land drainage consent process. And that will hopefully ensure that when a change is proposed to a drainage feature, it's done in a way that enables the water to be managed correctly. We have also, over the last few months, redrafted Appendix B, I think is in your committee papers today, which is the Flood Risk Management Strategy Action Plan, and that reflects the ambitions of the authority, we hope, and the place plan to reduce flood risk across the county and to enable communities to become much more resilient. And if approved today, we hope that revised strategy will guide our flood risk activity over the next 6 years and highlights our wider ambitions to move to use technology to improve our understanding of flood risk, look at how we can make space for water in Nottinghamshire work much better. We continue to work with our key partners. They're essential to the way we deliver our service in reducing the risk across the county and are raising awareness with communities to maximise our resources. We are, as the County Council, are incredibly ambitious for the future. We want to explore opportunities collaboratively. We have really strong links with partners and they've enabled us to realise mutually beneficial outcomes, which often enables us to do lots more for lots less. We have a desire to assist those residents and businesses that are the most vulnerable in terms of individual property flood resilience measures. We hope to realise that this year. These resilience measures would be for those that have historically flooded but fall outside of the Section 19 trigger, and they're the ones that are most susceptible to flooding in the county. Also, Appendix A to support the County Council's Flood Risk Management Capital Programme, which is currently seeing us set to deliver 27 schemes across the county. We have secured some significant amounts of external funding this year, £595,000 from DEFRA to undertake hydraulic studies of catchments across the county that we perhaps don't understand so well, to look at natural flood management schemes and to do some improvements to our ordinary watercourses. And lastly, we've secured £900,000 of flood defence granting aid and local levy funding, and that's been secured to help us deliver a scheme in Hucknall that will look to protect 86 properties from flooding that will commence this year. So as ever, the team and the County Council will continue to work closely with all of the partners, and the most vulnerable in our community will always be our priority. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you again to Andy and Emily for coming on today. I don't know if you want to say anything at the moment or whether you would like to come in as the meeting goes on. It's entirely up to you.
Good afternoon. I'll just say something really quickly to follow on from Sue, if that's okay.
Yep.
As Sue said there, that it's been an incredible year for flood risk management. We've had the worst flooding we've had in over a decade. We've also had some announcements of substantial funding, so it's game changing for us at the minute. We're at the last year of our capital programme at the minute. We had a 6-year settlement from government that concludes in March, but we've been given our next settlement, and that came out in the March budget, and it's twice as much as we had last time round, so it's £5.2 billion. We've had 140 million of that accelerated to be spent this year, and Sue and her team were successful in 8 bids for some of that money to, as Sue just said, understand our catchment better and to prime our programme for the next 6-year programme, so we know what our schemes will look like and we can protect more properties with that funding. And the only other thing to mention is we've had a more recent cash injection, which in your area includes Loudon. So if there are questions about Loudon, Worksop, Retford, or any other communities the Environment Agency leads on, myself and my senior advisor, Andy Disney, will be happy to take those.
Thank you very much. And if you just signal with the hand icon, I'll let you into the meeting whenever you want. And if it doesn't work, give me a wave. Okay, open the floor to members of the committee. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you very much,
Bruce.
John. I had a slight connection problem there. My internet went down.
Okay.
A couple of things, really, and Emily, picking you up on Loudon. So I noticed they'd done the car park down by the final whistle as part and parcel of the Southall Flood Alleviation Scheme. They made a fantastic job, to be fair, and I wish you can pass my thanks on to the team because they really worked really hard, even through lockdown, to carry out that works at the bottom end of the trail. But the car park wants white lining. When I go to the pub, I need to be able to park effectively. No, I mean I walk to the pub actually, as you're well aware. But no, it needs white lining. Then you get more cars on it really, because it's a really fantastic facility for the people in the area to be able to park and also use the trail. That was the first thing. The second thing is I'm going to rattle on, Emily, about Loudon, if I may, and Sue. Part and parcel of your report, you're saying Project Loudon will view to submitting their business case in August 2020. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're in September, aren't we? I just, Emily, I don't want to, you know, I was on the Severn Trent, believe it or not, Flood and Coastal Committee before it became the Trent Coastal Committee, and was rattling on about Loudon, and Roger's rung me actually, and we've had a chat about it. You know, we seem to be running into a little bit of difficulty, not a bit of difficulty, but a bit of delay over the possible highways improvement to Loudon roundabout in the conjunction of that, and I don't want it to stop it. We need to get moving on this one. You know, I've got individuals that I've known over many years with the responsibility of flooding who are continually living with this issue, and I'm very keen to push it forward and support you in any way, shape or form. And I'm really sort of, Glyn will back me up on this one. We've got to be very, very careful. Flooding is a major issue to this county, and we've got to be very careful that the COVID-19 does not mean we take our foot off the pedal as far as improving the protection of many of the properties. So finally, Sue, do pass my thanks on to the team. I think we should, you know, considering I was involved in it, I'm no longer the county councillor for Southall anyway, but I would love to, I think we should have, you know, an opening ceremony once it's all completed. I don't know how far off we are, but we should celebrate the amount of work and also the funding which has gone into that community to be able to protect all those properties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I've got Councillor Glyn Guilfoyle.
I'll just on mute. Thank you. I'd like to start with, well, saying thank you anyway to the officers, all of them who've been working around to put this together, but also at the same time, as we said before, the work that they've done on the ground. Firstly, one is, I know that we're going to get the normal winter maintenance leaflet that tells us about gritting, etc., etc. And I just wondered if there is something that could be produced about flood preparations and a guide, and also something that tells us how we are prepared, and also how the Environment Agency are prepared for the ensuing year, and also whether they're COVID proofed. Because clearly difficulties now are, if we're dealing with people, we've got to move, and floods, and how we work with those during the pandemic. And I wondered if any work had been done around that, whether that's through the LRF or through individuals as such, so they can, give us some sort of understanding that we are prepared for a flood if it occurs. The other issue is, obviously, I'm looking at the Appendix A, where it does highlight indicative figures, project costs. And clearly there's an amount of about £6 million that's highlighted for workshop. And I just wondered if there was an indication of what that actually cost is made up of, and what it actually means. And also that there are still issues in my locality anyway, in particular around the Shelley Street area, of flash flooding and it's surface water again normally, and the drainage issues around there. And I know I've reported them in, there's a couple of places, but clearly that really does need to be looked at. And then the other one is about the early warning. I know that people are going to look at whether they can give people an earlier warning around what's going off in areas, and how that is going to be set up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I couldn't get back on there, but I'm back on now. Councillor Greaves, I've got as next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Glenn's covered one of the points that I was going to raise. It's about early warning. As you know, last November, Worksop was devastated by flooding of the town centre, to which in excess of 400 houses and businesses were devastated, and some of the businesses have still not opened yet. Obviously, it's the River Ryton that's the main culprit, as you know, that comes through Worksop, and also Shire Oaks, I may add, gets the brunt first before it comes through Worksop. And I wondered if we could sort of get a better early warning, should I say, an earlier warning, because at the moment it doesn't seem fit for purpose, actually, the early warning that we get for Worksop and Shire Oaks. And I wondered if there's any way we can improve on that. And also with flood wardens, at the moment with the COVID crisis, is there any way that we can improve on training flood wardens, or if indeed we are training flood wardens at this time, and how we're going to do it being COVID safe, for instance? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. Emily, I don't know, because Worksop is Environment Agency, I believe, leading. Yeah. I wondered if you wanted, because those two were both on Worksop, would you like to come back in on that?
Yeah, I was racking them up, but if you'd like me to,
yeah,
to
just
come
thought
back,
it was appropriate, if that's okay.
I'll really quickly come back to Councillor Lawson, because that one's easier to answer. We won't be delaying any works to the A6097 roundabout. We are in correspondence with Notts County, and there's nothing that we'll be doing that would hold that up. So please don't worry about that. We're well engaged with Councillor Jackson. To my knowledge, he's happy with where we're at with the plans at the moment with upstream storage reservoirs. If you want to know more about that, I'm happy to talk to you offline, as not to take up any more of the meeting. But about Worksop, yes, about the warning system, you're right, Councillor Greaves, it is a tricky one to do. It's quite a new flood warning for us. It came in after the 2007 event. What we're doing at the minute with understanding the River Ryton's flood risk with that baseline modelling that I know we've talked about offline again in more detail will help us to better understand that catchment. It's upgrading that baseline model, and that can only be a good thing for our warning service. We never put a flood warning in unless we can provide adequate lead time, and the adequate lead time is set at about 2 hours. That's a national standard. So it doesn't guarantee that every single time there's a flood we've had sufficient good quality forecasts that we have that warning, but we wouldn't have a warning there unless we were confident we could meet that expectation of around about a 2 hour lead time, because I appreciate people need time to act, otherwise it really doesn't achieve its purpose. So it will be part of the review that we use our baseline model to look at. But in reality, you tend not to have a huge amount of notice when the size of storm that occurred in November does. You don't know where it's going to fall very often. So that's on the early warning situation. The flood warden one, yes, good idea. We've had some conversations with councillors, including yourself, Councillor Guilfoyle, Councillor, what was the third councillor's name? Alan Rhodes, in the last few months. Part of it is about resilience, is about training the community what the risk is that they live at, and flood wardens and flood action groups are a really key part of that. They are fantastic in Loudham. Loudham took its motivations from Southall, so we've seen some great flood warden action there. And yes, I think it's something we ought to talk about as a multi-agency partnership, training the flood wardens in Worksop. I'm just going to bring in Andy Disney, who's our senior advisor for that area, in case you wanted to add any more on that, Andy.
Yeah, just to add a few more bits about Worksop. As Emily mentioned, getting the baseline models vitally important. That will allow us to test what sort of future options we can do in and around Worksop. Currently, it's on schedule to be completed by the end of this year, and then we're going to use the first 3 months of next year. We secured some funding to test some high-level options. When we're considering high-level options, it may be a case of, if we take a very high-level approach to the model and look at what a glug of water almost taken out of the system would do. So in essence, mimic what holding some flood water upstream of Worksop would do, and upstream of Shire Oaks as well, because completely understand we can't make the situation worse for neighbouring communities as well. And if that starts to show that's beneficial, then we got a real opportunity to start working on that. Picked up on what Councillor Guilfoyle mentioned about cycling. Now, this could also be an opportunity to link in with some blue-green infrastructure through Worksop itself. So it may not be unachievable to look at improving cycling setups and what have you through Worksop itself as part of an overall flood risk scheme. What I will say is it's a very complex situation because Worksop's a very built-up area. We will certainly work and see what we can achieve through bringing in capital funding through grants in aid, but I think it's very much going to be a partnership approach to tackling flood risk in Worksop. It's going to be one that's going to require us all to work together and along with the district council as well.
There was one more from Councillor Guilfoyle, which was about preparation and about COVID. So just to reassure you that the Environment Agency is a Category 1 responder, much as yourselves, so has been very much involved in the COVID response and has not lost sight of its need to be ready to respond to a flood at a moment's notice. We've had increased rosters throughout this period. We've had workaround arrangements because we've obviously not been in the office. We are able to relocate in our Trentside office for the incident room if we need to. We've changed the incident room setup. So we've got plenty of people on standby. We've got all the resources that we need to do it. It wouldn't be nice to have to do it on your own from home, but we would be able to perform our duty to do that. The suggestion of a leaflet, I think, is one that we'll take away. That's a good idea.
Thank you, Emily. I've got two speakers left, and then I'll ask Sue if she wants to come back on any points that she's got. So it's Councillor Richard Butler next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I really wanted to, well, it goes without saying, anyone who's seen or witnessed or suffered from flooding, it's truly awful. And our team really do an extraordinarily good job. And it's been so challenging over the last year or so in particular. But I want to pick up on and agree with a comment that's been said in the paragraph 44 in Tollerton in particular. I'm being slightly parochial here, but you'll understand why. They did have terrible shocks last year and earlier this year with some houses being flooded again, having been flooded last year. Now, of course, when anything like this happens, even those of us who are supposed to know who does what and who's responsible for what and all the rest of it, let alone members of the public, we sometimes all get confused as just to who is responsible, who do you turn to and all the rest of it. And as a result, not necessarily on purpose, but misinformation or inaccurate information can start being passed around the communities and villages as to, oh, you need to speak to so-and-so or so-and-so, or so-and-so did do this or they didn't do that and they should have. So that's why I'm very pleased to see the final sentence in that paragraph that says we continue to liaise with affected residents where possible to ensure they are kept informed, because one of the biggest issues people have, whether it's flooding or any other disaster of some kind, is information and being kept informed. And sometimes people will feel they've been forgotten about, and even though they haven't been, even if it's just an occasional phone call or an email just to let them know we're still here, still on the case, it gives a tremendous amount of reassurance to residents and affected people, even if there isn't an overnight solution to whatever is causing the flooding. So the communication is key here, and also is very important from our point of view as being the lead authority to make it very clear that we are the relevant local lead authority for these matters. So really just to agree with what's been said in the report, but please do keep the communication lines open with obviously affected residents, also the likes of the parish councils. I know some parish councils are perhaps more responsive than others, and also obviously as you do now with the local member.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Hollis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just picking up on the issue of Thoresby Dale. I was hoping we'd get the particular update there. That's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got Councillor Rostons, please. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to just to sum up my bit before Sue sums her bit up at the end. Just to thank Sue and the team for again a great report and all the hard work that you and the team have been doing. And again, thank you to Emily and Andy, because it's important with it. We have this collaborative working, and we've got such a good relationship with yourselves and the other partners like Severn Trent. And as Councillor Butler alluded to, there's sometimes a lot of confusion about who does what and who's responsible for what, and that's why it's so good that we can work so closely together and have that really good working relationship. So thank you for joining us in this meeting today. It's great to see the huge extensive list of the ongoing and the future schemes, and all that has been made possible thanks to the team and their fantastic ability to obtain this external funding. They've been doing a great job with getting that to the council. And we've got some superb schemes. The one coming in at Titchfield Park I'm particularly excited about in my patch. We're investigating a lot of different new technologies that we've not really talked about, which are exciting as well. The telemetry and the drone equipment that could help also in the early prevention and could possibly help in the workshop and the Thoresby Dale with the CCTV to check on early prevention in the future. So it's good that we're not standing still. We're constantly looking at new technologies going forward. And finally, just one more part in Bruce's patch. With the southern or Southwell, I think it's important to mention in paragraph 23 that we have had some horrendous flooding throughout the year, November, February and June, where we've been hit with a storming event, and Southwell had no internal floods reported. So I think that is a real positive about the great work that we have been doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Phil, and thank you for those comments. Sue, do you want to go last? And I'll just ask Emily and Andy if they want to add anything to what's been said.
Yes, very happy.
You can have the last word. Okay.
Thank you.
Emily, we do appreciate you both attending, both you and Andy. If there's anything you want to come back on or to add, we'd be appreciative.
Nothing other than to say there was another question from Councillor Guilfoyle, but we have another meeting planned in September that Notts County are arranging, so we can pick it up then if that's okay with you.
Thank you. And you okay, Andy?
Yeah, I'm fine. The only thing I would say is that a lot of the communities we deal with that don't have schemes, they are often, the reason why they don't have schemes is because they're quite tricky solutions to come about. So it's very key that we have this good working relationship with yourselves, and we're very appreciative of that as well.
Thank you. And I will try and put you further up the agenda next time when I know that you're attending. Okay. Over to you, Sue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll deal with these in order, I think. Councillor Lawton, thank you for the thanks with regards to the scheme that VIA are delivering on the County Council's behalf up in Southwell. They have done an excellent job, and I'll pass your comments on about the white lines to the folks up there that are delivering that element of the scheme, so thank you. With regards to dealing with an event in the C19 situation that we are now, and this came in Councillor Guilfoyle's questions, I think, we certainly, when we began lockdown in March, did a lot of preparation work in terms of doing risk assessments and contingency planning in terms of how we would deal with an event if we got another flooding event. And as part of that, we also looked at how we would look to continue and work with flood wardens, with our emergency planning colleagues, to look at training up new volunteers if we have any come forward, and we have plans in place to do that. I certainly urge members, if you know of people in your community that would like to become volunteers and undertake flood warden training, if you could pass those through to us, we'll certainly move that forward for you. And certainly to echo Councillor Austin's thoughts in terms of new technology, we certainly take on board the earlier we can warn people about flooding, the better. And we've got a number of really flashy catchments in Nottinghamshire. We're certainly looking at putting those telemetry systems in those areas where they are flashy, and then also linking in with some of the warning systems and putting on the Notts application, which residents would have access to. We've also updated recently our flood risk management pages on the County Council's internet site, which gives details of how to deal with flooding situations in the crazy times that we are in quite currently. And lastly, I absolutely echo your comments, Councillor Butler, in terms of communication and how tricky sometimes it is to keep the lines of communications open across communities with parish councils and those residents that have been affected. And it's absolutely key to making sure that we deliver schemes successfully and that people understand who is responsible for what. And lastly, I'd just really like to thank committee for, as ever, your continued support to the flood risk team. It means an awful lot to members of staff that are out, on the front line dealing with folks that have been affected by flooding on a daily basis, and your support for our programme and our initiatives is really welcome, so thank you very much. And can I just finally, if that's all right, Chair, just hand over to Gary to deal with the Thoresby Dale question?
Okay, Gary, you're on.
Thanks, Sue.
Thoresby.
That was a good bit of it with delegation. I like that. Yeah, Thoresby, VIA have concluded their investigation, and so we'll send that through to you, Councillor Hollis. It's probably best not to just go through it all in committee because it's quite lengthy. But I'll send that through to you later today. I got an update from them yesterday on it.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So you get that today, Councillor Hollis.
I'll send it through to you, Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, that's great. But I think it'd be good to have just a brief overview. Are we going to be doing something or nothing? What synopsis of the report?
Yeah, so I think in summary, it looks as though the problems were caused by a blockage, and we're looking to change the arrangement so that the blockages don't occur in the future, so to stop that material getting in, and also we're just keeping an eye on the wear level. But I'll send you through the detail, Councillor Hollis, and if you want to have a chat about it, then obviously we can do.
That's greatly appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to both. Okay, so that's all the speakers. So I'm going to move now to the vote. Are there any objectors to the recommendations? I can't see any. Are there any abstentions? I can't see any, so I take it to mean, unless somebody tells me in the next minute or so, or less than that, that it's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, and thank you again to Andy and Emily. Okay, we move to item 12, which is the transport update and the transport recovery plan. And I should have prepared myself with the paperwork. The recommendation is that members consider the actions taken and ongoing work and consider whether there are any further actions they require in relation to the issues contained within the report. I propose that. I'd like a seconder, please.
Yeah, happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. And if you could take your hand down unless you want to have a chat, that would be appreciated. So over to you, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides a timely update on our current transport activity and particularly the response actions of the service area due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it covers in some detail in the report key elements of local bus provision, school transport and adult social care transport. It's pleasing to note today that the latest information I have is that yesterday and this morning's return to school transport has generally worked well. There's been a few minor teething problems, but we're working through those and learning from them. And obviously that'll be closely monitored over the coming days. And so I'll hand back to you, Councillor Cotty, at that point, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. And I'm mindful of the time, but I'm still happy to take questions, or if there's any conversations you want with Gary afterwards, then you're welcome to. And I would like to just put on record the hard work that's gone into the school transport and the work put in to support the other children that needed to be moved around the county for their excellent work. It's taken a lot of doing. Okay, over to the committee. Any members wish to speak? Councillor Creamer, I have. Thank you.
Just a quick question, because it's a little bit of a catch-22. With lots of parents not actually sending their children back by bus and moving by car again, are we putting anything in place to actually monitor increased car use around the schools? I say this because I take my wife to work and I actually pass a school. It's in the city, but I have never seen so many cars this morning as in years. So it's certainly affecting the city. So I assume it may be affecting our schools as well. So just a general question, are we actually putting anything in place to monitor safety, particularly around the schools? Because I think many parents will actually stop using the buses.
Okay.
Transport, they need to be encouraged to try and use them if it's all safe.
Thanks, Jim. I know we have a promotion running, but Gary said he'll come back at the end if there's any other questions. So if anybody else has any questions. The only one looks like Gary. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Creamer. Yeah, we've done a heck of a lot of work around this. So we started planning for this around 2 months ago, and I've chaired a local resilience forum cell with all the transport operators, and the schools are represented there. Met with all the school heads. We've had 4 teams meetings. I think, as Councillor Cotty mentioned, there's been a lot of comms around this, trying to encourage parents not to use cars and to use buses or walk and cycle as appropriate. And we are monitoring the situation. The schools have got an open line to the team if there are issues outside their particular school. And also we're very carefully monitoring traffic flows across the county, and we've been doing that for a number of weeks, and so we'll continue to do that. And one of the key things is how we can encourage people to either carry on working from home if that's appropriate, or to use appropriate modes of travel. So it's an issue that we're very mindful of, and obviously we'll be taking action appropriately. And if there are particular issues outside schools that are exacerbated, then I'm sure councillors will let us know as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollis, your hand has appeared.
Sure has. I thought everybody's missed me talking for the last few items.
They have.
Yeah, I know. I'd gone or something. But no, it was more just to do with the concession. I mean, with regards to the report, the recommendations ask for comments and regards it. Ultimately, the report itself is well written, but I think members of the administration won't be surprised to hear that. Obviously, I'm disappointed that obviously much of the funding has been removed from many of the people that need it. report after report with regards to concessionary bus passes, children attending schools, faith schools of their choosing. Unless you're a parent, a middle class parent that can afford to use the transport, really this report is just narrowing down to a very select number of people. I'd like funding to be restored. You know, we could suddenly find, was it £8 million this morning for stuff that we've not been able to budget properly for. And obviously next month we'll be approving a recycling centre for millions, but we can't find money for genuinely hardworking families who just want to better themselves and send kids to the schools of their choice. And I think to follow the Labour group position, I fully support it. We want to be seeing as many people back on public transport and buses as possible. We have an opportunity to do it. Don't fill me with pages and pages of report that's just hyperbole of congratulating when actually this funding's been massively reduced meeting after meeting. But other than that, Chair, I've got no comments to make on it. It's just our position on it is fundamentally different to the Conservatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Just checking that, yeah, we're all running. No other speakers? Anything to add, Gary? You okay? Okay.
We'll go to the vote.
Okay, we'll go to the vote then. Any objections or voting against the recommendation? Can't see anybody. Any abstentions?
Yeah, I'd like to vote against.
You are voting against, Councillor Hollis. Thank you. Any abstentions? And I take it the rest of the people are voting in favour of the recommendation. So thank you very much. Item 13, Bingham Road, provision of humped zebra crossing. Doug, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, sorry to keep you.
That's not a problem. So this report, the purpose of this report is to consider objections in relation to the installation of a humped zebra crossing on Bingham Road in Radcliffe. It is linked to a requirement of a planning consent for a development further away from there, but it did indicate that a humped crossing should be installed on Bingham Road in the vicinity of Bingham Road and New Road Junction. There were 3 objections received, the details of which are in the report, and the responses included as well. And the recommendation is that the proposals are put in place as implemented and advertised previously.
Thank you, Doug. There's an opportunity now to propose the recommendation, which is the hump zebra crossing proposed for Bingham Road is implemented as advertised and objectors informed accordingly. I propose that and look for a seconder. Thank you.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from anybody? Okay, we'll go to the vote then. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? Okay, I'll take it as a unanimous decision. Thank you very much indeed. Just leaves us with the work programme, and Noel, would you like to come in on that? Is anything?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly, the work programme is based primarily on the Police Department's forward plan, and obviously remains subject to review in light of the current COVID situation. And given decisions reported earlier today, we'll be including the Rushcliffe Recycling Centre on a future programme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any members with any comments on the work programme?
Just the things that we mentioned earlier, John, yep. To be added on.
Yes.
To be added on. We were going to vote against the last item to give the leader the hump, but we thought better on it.
I can't comment on that, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Point made, Glyn. Thank you very much. Okay. I appreciate everybody's input into the meeting, and thank you. It's been a long morning. Yeah. I shall let you get away, and we can all have our sandwiches now, though some have had them.
Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry,
Cheers.
Chair.
Oh, hold on.
Councillor Hollis is indicating.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just a very quick one, which I'm sure Councillor Hopewell would be keen to hear me try and get on the work programme. You'll recall 2 years ago, Mansfield and Sutton were promised £2 million for a recycling centre. Obviously, we're going to be talking about a recycling centre in next month's meeting, according to the now moved agenda item. I'd certainly like there to be included in any work programme. Maybe not the next month. I appreciate that's too soon, but obviously the county council holds evidence that Mansfield and Ashfield need a new centre. Conservative governments just said that we need to build another 4,000 houses per year now in both of our districts collectively. There's going to be an increased demand, and I think this just needs to be revisited in the work programme if members of the committee would support that. Thank you.
I will have a look into it, Councillor Hollis, and then come back to you. Am I on? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Noel. Okay. I'll close the meeting then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.